Live from the Jersey Shore to the world, get up, get out, do something. Wake up with Jeremy Grunin. Take the show wherever you go. Download the free Radio Pup app for your smartphone or tablet. Join the conversation, 732-505-1160. News Talk Radio WOBM AM 1160 and 1310. Listen online at WOBMAM.com.
Good morning and wake up. There's my boo-boo of the morning. Wake up. Get up and get out and do something today. It is 7:08, and I guess I was doing better in my first hour and a half than I'm going to do on my second hour. But it is April 13th. It is 7:08 in the morning. It is 32 degrees, so make sure you dress for the weather. But it will be a high of 55 today, and we are excited this morning to have with us Dr. Kristine Keane, and she is a neuropsychologist and the director of the Concussion Program at Ocean Medical Center in Brick, New Jersey. Good morning, doctor.
Good morning.
I'm glad to have you on, and hopefully, I always get nervous when I have doctors on, and that I'm going to butcher a name, or I always say when they give me a doctor, I'm like, make it an easy name, please. So hopefully, I got Kristine Keane correct this morning.
You got that exactly right.
Okay, very, very good. And thank you for joining us this morning. And so tell me a little bit about yourself, how you ended up here in Ocean County, and walk me through a normal day of Dr. Keane.
Well, I actually grew up in Ocean County. I did my undergraduate work at Rutgers, and I finished off with a doctorate in clinical psychology at the University of Rochester, and then specialized in neuropsychology. I have a practice in Brick across from the Ocean Medical Center, Shore Neuropsychology and Behavioral Health, and we have practice locations in Howell and Red Bank. And a typical day for me is generally I see adults and children for concussion. And we also treat a variety of other neurological disorders, such as dementia, mild cognitive impairment, stroke, and other more severe traumatic brain injuries, to name a few.
Okay. Tell me a little bit I guess in terms of comprehensive concussion programs and resources. What does Meridian do, and what do you do relative to concussion treatment?
So the Meridian Neuroscience Concussion Program was developed years ago in response to the growing numbers of concussions that are found for children and athletes. I'm sure you've heard on media, we have the Concussion movie. And so that's how the program began, and the services were expanded to include adults and older adults. So we have program locations that are affiliated with each of the hospitals in Monmouth and Ocean counties, and that includes Southern Ocean, Ocean Medical, Jersey Shore, and Riverview. And we're treating concussions that are sustained not only from sports, but falls, motor vehicle accidents, bicycling. And the concussion program, it really starts in the emergency department or pediatrician's office or primary care. We have urgent care centers in multiple locations across Ocean County. And what's unique about them is that they communicate directly to the concussion centers, and they can provide emergency evaluation to determine the need for a CT scan or an MRI of the brain. And the concussion program itself is comprehensive. It includes multiple specialties depending on the symptom constellation after the head injury. So we're working with Meridian neurologists, neurosurgery, neuro-ophthalmology, sports medicine, physical therapy, vestibular therapy, to name a few. We also work closely with Meridian Rehabilitation or Meridian Life programs because a lot of times when there is a concussion, there has been other physical injuries. So they're treating, say, cervical spine, whiplash, that are common to a fall or sports injury or motor vehicle accident. And they have a vestibular program that evaluates balance, offers balance therapy, vision therapy, speech, and cognitive rehabilitation. So we have a lot of great programs within the system that comprise the concussion program.
How's a person evaluated for a concussion?
So, like I said, you initially have your emergency evaluation, which would occur right after a fall or injury, and that can occur in a physician's office or in the emergency room or urgent care center. Once you enter the concussion program, you are first evaluated based on your symptom constellation. There's a clinical interview, which helps us understand the mechanism of the injury, your medical history, psychiatric history, your social history, your occupational, that's all taken into account when we're looking at the effects of the concussion, because it can impact the severity and how long the concussion may last. So once the patient enters the program, we assess the symptoms. They undergo a balance examination, coordination examination, visual, ocular, motor screening, and we assess in some way their cognitive abilities.
Is there a group of, I guess, somewhat of a crazy question, is there a group of individuals, young versus old, that are more susceptible to concussions if they have head trauma?
So younger and older. So, I tell parents there was we used to think, well, the kids will just bounce back, but really children are more vulnerable to the effects of a concussion. Their brains are developing. So we tell them we want to treat the children as conservatively as possible. And then older adults are actually more susceptible to, even when there's a minor head injury, they're more susceptible to more severe symptoms, and they are at a higher risk of poor outcomes. And just like the child's brain is developing, in older adults, there is often a loss of brain volume. The meninges and dura that normally protect the brain inside the skull undergo changes in later life, and the protective factors are reduced when you're older. So you're going to take a hit differently than you would as a college athlete or a younger adult.
Yeah, I didn't make it to being a college athlete. I was only a high school athlete, but yeah, I remember as a teenager, you hit your head and everybody ran to you, and the first thing they did was they looked in your eyes. And what are they actually looking for? When you see a patient or somebody who comes in and says, I have a head trauma, what is it you're exactly looking for that maybe other people could look for in just their children?
Well, the number one thing that I tell parents to look for is, to initially know the symptoms. So, there's symptom constellations. There's cognitive symptoms, there's physical symptoms, emotional symptoms, and, of course, sleep symptoms. But initially, physically, after a concussion, you're going to hear the person complain of headache, nausea, vomiting. They may be dizzy. They may lose their balance. Their vision can be blurred, immediately fatigued, become sensitive to light, to noise. They're looking for, when they say light, they're looking for their pupils dilating. But a lot of times, I tell parents the headache is severe. The child is very disoriented, vomiting repeatedly. Those are the signs that you need to bring your child to an emergency department immediately. Any kind of deterioration following a concussion would be a red flag. So severe symptoms would bring you to the emergency room immediately. Okay. So besides the physical symptoms, there are cognitive symptoms. So a person may be disoriented immediately. They have difficulty thinking clearly. They feel slowed down. They have trouble with concentration. Their memory is reduced. And then you don't really hear this immediately after the injury, but emotionally, maybe more irritable. They become more labile, sad, and nervous.
I want to come back to these symptoms right after the break. We are talking to Dr. Kristine Keane, a neuropsychologist and director of the Concussion Program at Ocean Medical Center. We'll be back in a moment.
Stay tuned for Preferred Company with Joel Markell and Marianne Levy at 8. Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin continues next. News Talk Radio WOBM AM 1160 and 1310.
Good morning and welcome back to Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin. I am Phil Brilliant, pinch hitting for Jeremy this morning. It is 7:21. It is 32 degrees. Get a high today of 55 degrees, so it is cold out. Wear your coat this morning, and you can go to a lighter coat this afternoon. And we're continuing our conversation with Dr. Kristine Keane, a neuropsychologist and director of the Concussion Program at Ocean Medical Center. Doctor, you still there with me?
Yes, I am.
We actually have a caller to talk to you. We have Tony, I believe, from Tom's River. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning. I really appreciate someone like her credentials to come on your radio show. I have a very deep question for her, but maybe she could simplify it for me.
Are you ready, Doctor?
Sure.
Okay. I was a psych major, and I was very interested in Freudian psychology, and I read all his works. I don't know if you're familiar on his theory of the cathexis and how the birth trauma affects every human being that's born.
Okay.
Can you repeat that? I didn't hear that.
Tony, can you repeat that again?
Yeah, I'll take off the speakerphone.
Thank you.
Freud had something called the cathexis. It was based on a birth trauma that every human being, when he or she is born, develops this birth trauma. And the degree of the birth trauma actually creates the destiny of what you're going to do with your life, because you're born with a certain amount of energy. The problem is, the greater the cathexis, you have to create a cathexis to release the cathexis. So when we get a trauma externally from the world, it disturbs that trauma even further. So what it comes down to is we become either overstructured or understructured with our mental energy. So when you get a trauma, how do you go back to being the balance level that you were born with? Because according to him, when you get hurt, it's the electrical system that gets disturbed, and medical science only deals with the systems which they understand. But nobody understands the synaptic, electrical, neurological system. So do you think he's flawed in that thinking?
So thank you, Tony. I think Doctor, Tony is, I guess, asking the question relative to, Freud's beliefs in the effects of our life at childbirth. Am I understanding that correctly?
I think you were talking about the effect of trauma.
Right. Trauma at the beginning of life and how that kind of shapes the rest of our life. That was my take on it, but I'm the layman on the phone here. Is that what you were talking about, Tony? I think we've lost Tony.
Yeah, Tony split on us, so...
I guess the question, Doctor, would be how is an early age trauma affect the rest of our lives?
Okay, well, certainly an early age trauma will influence our cognitions, depending on what the trauma is. We in working with trauma, we call things little T trauma, big T trauma, and that can affect you physiologically, and depending on when the trauma took place. Basically, we treat trauma now with what's called cognitive behavioral therapy. There are other therapies. That one has a lot of empirical support. And so we're looking at a person's cognitions and helping change them, to reframe them, your behaviors that influence the trauma, as well as your emotional state. So that therapy is a little bit different than the Freudian therapies in that it's very problem-solving oriented. And I guess what Tony was referring to, I guess, was the trauma of birth and how that aligns the system.
Yeah, I have an uncle who is a psychoanalyst and very much into Freud, and everything dates back to that day you were born. and that basically your entire life is shaped from that moment as you left your mom. But I think nowadays with medicine and everything, it sounds like we have ways to identify that and treat that. And we're going to talk more with Dr. Kristine Keane after the news break. She is the director of the Concussion Program at Ocean Medical Center. And please remember, join the conversation at 732-505-1160. We will be back in a moment.
Live from the Bob Levy Broadcast Center, overlooking the Toms River, it's time to get up, get out, do something. Wake up with Jeremy Grunin. Be a part of the show, 732-505-1160. News Talk Radio, WOBM AM 1160 and 1310. Listen online at WOBMAM.com.
Good morning and welcome back to Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin. I am Phil Brilliant, substituting for Jeremy, who just told me that he is on the Parkway in traffic, and everything you just heard on the traffic report is true. The traffic on North and South Parkway is bad. Major serious accidents. And so please be careful out there this morning. And Jeremy, be careful and get to your destination safe. We are here this morning at 7:36 with Dr. Kristine Keane, a neuropsychologist and the director of the Concussion Program at Ocean Medical Center. We're continuing our conversation. Doctor, you still with me?
Yes.
And just wanted to let you know that Tony did call back and wanted to thank us for taking his call and for you addressing his questions relative to his Freudian views. So
Great.
So we were talking about concussions, and we were talking. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about was, why is it that concussions are missed in older adults, and why is that so risky?
Okay, so in older adults, a lot of times when they enter an emergency room or their physician's office, the physician is going to address the physical trauma first. There's a very high percentage of hip fractures that occur after a fall. So pain usually dominates the clinical picture, and the physician is going to address that. One of the things that happens is after a fall, the person may be disoriented, may be complaining of memory problems. However, the physician or the nurses or the caregiver may not have an understanding of what the person was like before the fall and may expect because of their age, to have memory problems or some level of disorientation. So always good for a family member or caregiver to help and assist in the physician understanding that if there was a change from prior to the accident to after the accident. Also, concussions develop over time. A lot of our athletes will say, my head hurt to start with, but a few hours later, that's when I really started to feel badly. So we know that concussions are developing injuries. You may be in the emergency room, you may be in a lot of pain, and you may not realize how disoriented you are, if you're having balance problems, if you're laying down. A lot of times people will come home from the hospital, they'll be in their home environment, and then their regular activities of daily living are compromised. And it's not until they get home and try to read or to cook that they realize that there's an issue.
Yeah. And you're talking a lot about symptoms, and we talked a little about symptoms before in children. And I know, I'm a big sports fan, and I watch NFL games, college football games, and you see the players taken off the field, and the doctor, going through some cognitive tests, and then they take the football helmet away, and this player is like, get me back in the game, get me back in the game. And, so I guess, the questions go back to, doctors know best. You need to get to a doctor.
Yes, absolutely. We tell the kids it's from the Brain Injury Alliance, when in doubt, sit them out. So, if you observe anything that looks like a head injury, a lot of times the athlete is going to say, get me back in, I'm fine. We can expect that because that's what they do.
Yeah, because they want to be back in there. But I think also, and it's not just, it's the coaches, the parents, and I think you said, the caregivers and the family members. Concussions, we've learned are very serious, and, they can lead, to, more and more illness as you go forward.
It can. You know, in the younger population, and then the older, if not treated early on, you can prolong symptoms. So the first thing that we do after we see a concussion is we prescribe a period of cognitive and physical rest, and that applies to anyone who's had a concussion. So you want to lower the stimulation, give the brain time to heal. And when we don't do that, we know that symptoms can be prolonged as long as 30 days out.
So not seeing it until 30 days out, or lasting 30 days?
You can, I'm really just quoting a study that was done on college-age athletes that didn't rest. Their symptoms lasted 30 days more than those that did rest. So there are multiple studies that show that a cognitive and a physical rest period immediately after a concussion can shorten the time that you experience concussion symptoms. So we know we want to do that. What we don't know is how long that cognitive rest period needs to be. So that really depends on the physician that the patient is working with and what their symptom constellation looks like.
Oh, wow. Now, are there different treatments between a younger adult and an older adult, or do you treat everybody pretty much the same way?
Well, with the children, when we're looking across the lifespan, obviously there are different concerns. So with the children, the program looks at a return to learn and a return to play, depending on, is this a student athlete? What kind of clubs is the child involved in? What are the recreational activities? Because for children and adults, what we're looking at is when is it safe to return to sports, to physical activities, to recreational activities? Because we don't want to have a concussion on top of a concussion. We're not really sure in science just yet how the brain can deal with another concussion when it's already started a metabolic change from an initial concussion. So we know after a second impact, this is why it is so serious, especially with adolescents, that the brain can herniate and swell, and in some rare cases can cause death. So the number one concern is when is this concussion resolved? And then when is it safe to begin recreation sports? For kids, this doesn't apply to adults, but with a lot of adults, we're looking at return to occupational functioning. Is it safe? Are these permanent injuries?
Okay.
And then that's going to depend a lot on what the person does for a living as well.
Okay. We're going to go to break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about how treatment occurs, and then also talk about what you would do if you had unlimited resources and had Jeremy's magic wand that could help all the world with concussion issues and brain issues. We'll be back in a moment.
Wake up with Jeremy Grunin wherever you go. Download the Radio Pup app for your smartphone or tablet. News Talk Radio WOBM AM 1160 and 1310. Now, back to Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin. News Talk Radio WOBM AM 1160 and 1310 and WOBMAM.com.
Welcome back. Welcome back to Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin. We are continuing our conversation with Dr. Kristine Keane, the director of the Concussion Program at Ocean Medical Center. And thank you very much for hanging with us this morning through all the breaks. We were talking about treatments. You had covered a little bit about the younger adults and the children, trying to get them back into their activity. And then we were touching a little bit upon the older population, either getting them back to work or whatever they need to do in their given day. So what are the different treatments for them?
For older adults?
Yes.
Okay, so I would say first off, after a fall, you're looking at the person's ability to ambulate. So if there's a family member or a caregiver, the decision is made whether the person can be discharged home safely or do they need a referral to a rehabilitation center or skilled nursing care center. Older adults that visit the concussion program and are assessed for their symptom constellations, depending on what that looks like, they may need to continue with physical therapy. Sometimes there are problems with language after a head injury, so we have speech therapy. If symptoms of headaches continue. That's very common. A lot of times we'll refer for neurological evaluation and maybe further radiological study. I'm a neuropsychologist, so one of the things that we do, if cognitive symptoms such as memory, attention, processing speed, reaction time persist, we'll provide them with a neuropsychological evaluation and look at how the brain is functioning and how they are able to function within their daily living activities or, like we said, their work. There may need to be medication adjustments. Vestibular therapies are quite common after concussion, and vision therapy as well.
Okay. So again, the goal for everybody relative to be young or old is really to try to get them back into their normal way of life, back into their activities. And though the treatment may be somewhat similar, the end result is going to be based upon their age and their abilities and their what their normal day and activities are.
That's right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you can't just say, the recovery is 2 weeks, the recovery is a month. Everybody's individualized into a program.
Yes, every concussion is different, and then every individual comes to us with a different history. So your medical history, your psychiatric history, learning disabilities, attention deficits, that all plays into how your concussion might look.
Okay. So as we went to break, I said to you, I threw you a curveball, and I said that we always give our guests the Jeremy Grunin magic wand, which allows you to choose what you would do with that wand, unlimited resources. You could do anything in the world to help people, help patients, help the world. What would you do with that magic wand?
In terms of the kids with concussion, education is key. So for parents and coaches, teachers, the school systems, to be aware of the signs and symptoms and to get them the proper medical treatment, and to really understand the seriousness of concussion and how we need to keep these players safe. So I think that starts with the front line, and that being the parents and the coaches and the teachers. In terms of older adults, same idea that there's a lot of education for the people who are caring for older adults, the older adults themselves, that they talk to their doctors about their risk of falls, reviewing their medicines, looking at their vitamin D levels, doing exercises that make them stronger, to improve their balance, like Tai Chi and yoga, having their eyes checked. So to really understand and to care for themselves. And, I was just having a conversation with one of my patients yesterday about using her walker. And a lot of times we hear patients say they don't want to use their walker or their cane. And that can really put you at a more serious health risk for other problems beyond a brain injury as well. So to really understand the seriousness of this and to take preventative measures and to be aware.
Well, I think that is great advice at all, and I think again the one takeaway that I've heard you say several times this morning is, when in doubt. What was that line? When in doubt.
When in doubt, sit them out.
When in doubt, sit them out. I love that. Thank you very much, Dr. Kristine Keane, a neuropsychologist and the director of the Concussion Program at Ocean Medical Center. Thank you for taking the time this morning to talk to us, and we will be back in a moment.